control to all drivers. Exercise caution as you're approaching Gallatin Green. I'm told there's fog on the road there.
Is that the way on to into town or on the way out?
Smart horse. I'm supposed to stand out there on the road doing this job, in all weathers. It's just that I'm well got with the head security man here at Hawkins House, Corkman. And he lets me use this hut. One of my superiors, a customer service manager, he came in and caught me here one day. I was eating a sandwich and he reported me to my divisional manager. Said I was drinking tea. Just shows you the way he was fed as a young lad when he doesn't know the difference between 2 slices of bread and a cup of tea. I was only in here for 3 minutes when he caught me, so I nicknamed him the 3-Minute Man. I passed on the sobriquet to my subordinates without elaboration or explanation, and it took on the desired connotation. That's nearly a month ago, and I haven't seen him since. But he could appear anytime. He might be here this morning. He's like that. Goes underground for ages, and then suddenly reappears. Like a leprechaun that you haven't caught in time. You won't see him if it's raining, though. There are 4 species that don't like getting wet. Arses, cats, corner boys, and customer service managers. But I was telling you about Hawkins House here. It's the headquarters of the Department of Health and Education. It was built on the site of the old Theatre Royal. There once stood one of the finest theatre in the whole of Ireland. It's the Royal. With a splendid look from the outside and an interior to match. With smartly dressed ushers standing at the doors in their wine-coloured uniforms. Many renowned world stars of screen and stage appeared there over the years. One that springs to mind was the famous cowboy, Roy Rogers, and his horse is called Trigger. Bill Haley in the comments of the 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock fame. You could go to an afternoon matinee that consisted of a variety show followed by a movie. The same show was performed again that evening. One of the highlights of the variety show was the famous Tommy Dando, who was an organist who would appear coming up through the floor at the side of the stage, playing this gigantic Wurtzler organ, much to the delight of the audience who would join in a sing-song with the words on a backdrop on the stage. No digital in those days. The Royal was famous for its female dance troupe, the Royalettes. This was a group of about 30 females performing dance routines to precision timing in their special dance costumes, otherwise known as Tiller Girls. There was Noel Purcell, Mixter Reed, a dwarf. There were some smart speaks about Mixter's anatomy, I'm telling you. And of course the Royalettes, a troupe of dancers also known as Tiller Girls. They were mini-skirted before it was fashionable. Mini-skirt, not the dance. They weren't allowed to sit down between acts. They had to stand against a padded rail, so that they wouldn't pucker their costumes. Some of them would be well puckered after the show, says you. Oh, big changes. The beautiful building that was demolished to build this monstrosity, this one here behind me. When I first came to Dublin, the Theatre Royal was in full swing. I first came to the city to work on the buildings. The money wasn't great, and the proceeds from the sale of scrap lead and anything else weighing less than a ton that wasn't nailed down helped.
4th volunteer to control, over.
Receiving you, over.
I'm running late and the 5th car is in front of me. I will transfer my load over to him or will I turn? Over.
Hold on, over. Control to 548A, over.
Receiving you, over.
The car ahead of you is behind you. Will you take his passengers? Over.
Okay, over.
Back to 4th volunteer.
Receiving you, over.
Transfer your load and crossovers. Over. Your time is not your own in this job. Where was I? Oh, yes. I was telling you about when I worked in the construction industry. Well, I used to socialize with a number of bus conductors in Ranelagh, and they always appeared to have money. And I was soon to learn what making the rent meant in busman's parlance. It meant forgetting to issue a ticket for the fare tender. And according to my informants, it was a lucrative and widespread practice on certain routes. And stories of pelvic activities with female passengers cropped up too frequently to be all imaginings. At the time, I was working for a mild-mannered building contractor named Peter Ewing. He paid the rate, or slightly above it, and working conditions were good, but I applied for a job on the buses. There was a television ad running at the time, wanted 2 men to crew this Dublin bus. I was called into CIE's head office for an interview and came up with a sustainable pack of lies in response to the question, why do you want to work for CIE? Next came the exam. This consisted of doing sums and writing an essay. I thought I could manage the essay, but I would nearly have to open my trousers to count to 21. However, my lack of mathematical prowess in the latter was more than compensated for by my dubious talent for reading upside down, sideways, or at any obtuse angle that presented itself. I sometimes tell people that I acquired this ability when I worked in a printer shop. This is a lie. It is a natural defect which, coupled with good sight, enabled me to cog from the fellow beside me, behind me, or anywhere in the vicinity. My essay, Why I Want to Be a Bus Conductor, was a not quite Cavan-esque account of snagging turnips in the frost, loading dung, picking stones, and cutting thistles. And how, when the building trade would slow down, I didn't want to go back to such menial agricultural tasks. If this trade would slow down, I didn't want to go back to it. If this document is extant today, it would embarrass me. That's not easily done. I passed the exam, and when the doctor at the cursory medical checked my lungs and counted my clovers, I was in. After a week in the training school, and a further week with the conductor, I was let loose on the travelling public, with a bag and a ticket machine. The minimum fare at the time was 6p, and a significant proportion of the travelling public were conscientious about the conservation of the paper. On certain routes, you would be offered 5p, or even 4p, with the immortal words, "Go ahead," or the less laconic would say, "Spare the paper." The drawback to this profitable and challenging exercise was that if an inspector boarded, you could be booked and end up in the manager's office accused of making the rent. A small percentage, only a small percentage, of rent makers was sacked. I survived. Top Cat was of the most feared severity. If Top Cat found anything wrong on a bus, he would delight in the best of humour, humming a catchy tune. But if everything was shipshape, it was a grumpy and unsociable Top Cat that got off. The detection rate for rent making was kept to a minimum by drivers given the billing. A bus coming in the opposite direction would flash the lights and give a coded signal to indicate where the inspector was and who exactly it was. This information was then relayed to the rent maker by his own driver, who would flash the saloon lights and rattle the gear lever and slam the cab and slam the door down. When OPO, one-person operation, came into force, it didn't stop rent making, but it increased the detection rate. One driver, who had been caught a number of times, eventually had his employment terminated. At his dismissal, the garage manager sarcastically remarked, "Well, thank you for bringing the bus back, anyway." "Oh no," says your man, "thank you for the loan of it." I eventually qualified as a driver. And then it was my turn to rattle the gear lever, etc., and warn drivers coming in the opposite direction in the appropriate manner. Each conductor had a pack of emergency tickets for use in the event of a malfunction of the ticket machine. One old inspector, referring to one particular route, every ticket given out on this road is an emergency ticket. Conductors from certain garages would hold a rent maker's ball. This was an annual get-together, the venue for which would be kept secret from the outsiders. The story may be acropical, but it was said that on one such event, a neighbour asked his wife, "What's the noise from X's?" When told they were holding a rent maker's ball, he's alleged to have said, "Well, I wish to St. Patrick they'd let it go." When I was a conductor, I was too busy trying to supplement my wages to chat up any commuting females who might be agreeable to gentle vibrations administered at regular intervals to the lower abdomen. Many of my colleagues expended a lot of energy through horizontal jogging, and one in particular described the phenomena of getting the occasional Caelan of Imper as an occupational hazard. T.E. Hulme said that the steel staircase of the emergency exit at Piccadilly Circus was the most uncomfortable place in which he had ever copulated. He must have never ever attempted to hide the baldy miner on the back seat of a Bombardier bus. There was a conductor on the 76 route who was renowned for his wit, or in the parlance of the day, he had words at will. It was he who said when female drivers came into that job that the cab should now be called the box office. One day, going through Fettercairn, he was taking a lot of stick from a mother with 2 kids. When he could take no more, he asked, "Are they twins, missus?" The enraged mother snapped, "How the shamrock would they be twins when one of them is 8 and the other's 5? Are you stupid or what?" "No," says the conductor. "It's just that I didn't think that anyone would write it twice." Many clinical transport terms became double entendres. Transferring your load, pulling out on time, took on ambiguous meanings. And of course, many busmen had nicknames. One conductor was called BBC. Started out as Big Bum because of his elaborate posterior, and was then abbreviated to BB. And since C was the initial of his surname, it was a natural progression to BBC. But wait till I tell you. Then his son joined the company, so we had BBC 1 and BBC 2. 250 was an inspector who got the title because he had been given £5 to give to a conductor by a passenger who had been reunited with her lost property. But he decided that 50% would be adequate reward for the conductor, and he held on to the other £2.50. I suppose you could say it was to cover administration costs. Another got the title milk bottle because of his penchant for hiding in doorways. If he had any less between his ears, it would have been necessary to water him every day. His genetic IQ came as no surprise to those of us who had looked into the stud book. Pedigree is very important. His father was out during the Troubles and during the Civil War. Himself and Tom McGovern were transporting a sack full of ammunition through the Wicklow Mountains under cover of darkness. While crossing a makeshift bridge at Ballydon, a moonbeam betrayed them. They became silhouettes against the night sky and targets for the waiting Free Staters. In McGovern's case, self-preservation took precedence over national independence, and he promptly dropped to his knees to avail of what little cover there was. He shouted at his companion to do likewise, and back came the reply, "I can't, I'm wearing my good trousers, and it will be destroyed." In the early days of Telefacir, a man in Marino had left his TV aerial down on the road while he tried to establish where Kipur was. Pressure from the wheels of a number 24 bus, driven by Tom Murray, ensured that there would be no Toka Row in that house for a while. The less than pleased DIY man pursued Tom to the terminus and informed him, "You are after breaking my television aerial." Tom's expletive, prefaced truism, "buses don't fly," earned him the immortal nickname the Jet Murray.
51454 to control, over.
Receiving you, over.
I have a major problem. My near sight indicator is only working intermittently, over.
I'll get you a change of bus at the outer terminus, over. Should have told her that it's only meant to work intermittently. She's always the same. She called me here one day to report that a male passenger was shouting, "A leprechaun's bit me leg! A leprechaun's bit me leg!" She was looking for an instruction as to what she should do next. I gave her the only instruction that I could think of. Check him off at the next stop. I remember when I was driving, I was working with a Clippy who was vertically challenged, and she couldn't reach the handle to change the scroll. Do you remember the metal box that conductors carried the ticket machine in? Anyway, says I to her, "Why don't you stand on your box?" "If I could do that," says she, "I'd be in a bleeding circus." Then when the first female drivers arrived, one of the lads said that the cab should no longer be described as such. He said it should now be called the box office. After I spent 6 years driving the Powers, that were decided that poacher makes the best gamekeeper, and they promoted me. Being a pleasing, people-pleasing sort of bastard, booking drivers and conductors was not really my style. As an inspector, you'd be sent out to do dirty checks. This involved hiding in the most obscure places and routes in an attempt to catch drivers, or more often than not, conductors, off sites. Ambitious men who saw themselves going places loved us. When I first came out, an old, level-headed inspector gave me a bit of advice pertaining to avoidance of tasks which one found unpalatable. No matter what you're sent to do, make a bollocks of it, and then you won't be sent again. One evening, having checked a number of 65 bus full of mountainy people in various stages of civilization, returning to their homes, I sat down on a vacant seat. In the seat opposite me were an elderly man and a pretty young girl. The man was eating an ice cream cornet, looked rather delicious, looking topping, and he looked very ill at ease and uncomfortable. He was constantly crossing and uncrossing his legs, shifting in his seat. The young lady, in an obvious attempt to put him at ease, looked at the topping of his ice cream and asked, "Crushed nuts?" "No," says your man. "I think it's a touch of arthritis." Wait till I tell you about the time I was driving the staff car behind a bus when I observed a pavement hostess was on her way to work, and she was in a state of undress upstairs while changing into her street clothes. I called the driver on this yoke here and told him to pull in at the next stop. As I boarded the bus and told the driver about the situation upstairs and that I was going upstairs to investigate, I was overheard by a visually impaired male passenger. He wore very thick glasses, but obviously had an acute auricular sense by way of compensation. As I mounted the stairs, he jumped from his seat, hurriedly wiped his spectacles with a handkerchief, shouting, "Wait for me! Wait for me!"
The 3-minute man is in the Dollar Street. 514 to Hawkins Street. Enemy approaching. 3-minute man approaching. First volunteer to control. Get out of that hut. 3-minute man. The egg timer in vicinity.
Receiving you. Over. Thank you.